Adelaide Rivers stood in the cramped office of the debt collection agency, her hands trembling as she signed yet another payment agreement. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow on the stack of papers that represented someone else's mistakes. 3 years ago, she had made a promise to a dying man, and that promise had become a chain around her neck, dragging her deeper into financial ruin with every passing month. "That's the last one," the agent said, sliding the receipt across the desk. "Your brother's debts are finally cleared." Adelaide wanted to correct him. Gabriel Martinez wasn't her brother. He wasn't even her friend, really. He was the man who had crashed into her father's car on a rainy November night, killing him instantly, and then dying himself hours later in the hospital. But before he died, Gabriel had grabbed her hand with desperate strength and begged her to take care of his younger sister, to make sure his debts didn't destroy the only family he had left. In her grief and shock, Adelaide had said yes. She walked out into the bright afternoon sunshine, feeling hollowed out. 28 years old, and she had spent the last 3 years working 2 jobs to pay off a dead stranger's obligations. Her savings were gone. Her apartment was a studio in the worst part of town. Her social life had evaporated, but it was done. Finally done. Adelaide pulled out her phone to call Maya, Gabriel's sister, to tell her the good news. The girl was 19 now, safely through her first year of college on a scholarship Adelaide had helped her apply for. Before she could dial, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Miss Rivers." The voice was deep, professional male. "Yes, my name is Harrison Chen. I'm calling from Martinez Holdings International. We understand you've been settling debts on behalf of Gabriel Martinez." Adelaide's stomach dropped. "I just paid the last one. The collection agency confirmed it." "Not quite," Harrison said, and she could hear the apology in his tone. "There's one more debt, a significant one. Mr. Martinez borrowed $500,000 from our CEO shortly before his death. The loan was personal, not through any bank, which is why it's taken us this long to track down his estate. $500,000. The number rang in Adelaide's ears like a death knell. "I can't," she whispered. "I don't have that kind of money. I don't have any money." "We understand this is difficult. Our CEO would like to meet with you to discuss arrangements. Would you be available tomorrow at 10? Adelaide wanted to scream, to throw her phone into traffic, to run until her legs gave out. Instead, she heard herself say, "Where?" The address Harrison gave her was in the financial district, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. Adelaide had walked past it 100 times, never imagining she'd have reason to enter. That night, she lay awake in her narrow bed, staring at the water-stained ceiling. 3 years. 3 years of sacrifice, and it had all been for nothing. There was no way she could pay $500,000. She'd be paying until she died. Maya's future, the one bright spot in this whole nightmare, would be tainted by debt collectors and legal threats. The next morning, Adelaide dressed in her best outfit, which was a simple black dress she'd bought at a thrift store for job interviews. She took the bus downtown, watching the city transform from shabby to prosperous as they moved through different neighborhoods. The Martinez Holdings building loomed above her, all sharp angles and reflective surfaces. Security checked her name against a list and directed her to the executive elevators. The ride to the 45th floor was so smooth, she barely felt the movement. The doors opened onto a reception area that probably cost more than she'd earn in a lifetime. Everything was cream marble and dark wood, with abstract art on the walls that she suspected was actually famous. Adelaide Rivers, a woman in an elegant gray suit, approached her. "I'm Sophia Lynn, Mr. Martinez's executive assistant," He's ready for you." Adelaide followed her down a hallway lined with windows that overlooked the entire city. She could see the river glinting in the distance, the bridges spanning it like delicate threads. They stopped at a set of double doors, and Sophia knocked once before opening them. "Miss Rivers, sir." Adelaide stepped into an office that was bigger than her entire apartment, floor-to-ceiling windows on 2 walls, a massive desk that looked carved from a single piece of ebony. And behind it, rising from his chair, was the most striking man she had ever seen. He was tall, easily 6'3", with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit perfectly. His hair was dark, almost black, with just a hint of wave to it, but it was his eyes that caught her. They were a startling gray-green, sharp and intelligent, and they were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Miss Rivers," he said, coming around the desk to offer his hand. "I'm Grayson Martinez." His grip was warm and firm. Adelaide found her voice. "Martinez." "Are you related to Gabriel?" Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe, or regret. "He was my younger brother. Half-brother, technically. Different mothers, same father. Please sit." He gestured to a seating area by the windows, 2 leather chairs with a low table between them. Adelaide sat, her mind racing. Gabriel had never mentioned having a wealthy older brother. Then again, Gabriel had never mentioned much of anything. She only knew his name and his face from the police reports. Grayson settled into the other chair, and she noticed he moved with a kind of controlled grace, like an athlete or a dancer. "I want to apologize," he said. "This situation is complicated, and I'm sure it's the last thing you need right now." "Why did you lend him that much money?" Adelaide asked. The question came out more accusatory than she intended, but she was too tired to soften it. Grayson's jaw tightened. "Gabriel and I had a difficult relationship. Our father remarried when I was 12, had Gabriel a year later. There was always tension between us, especially as we got older. Gabriel struggled with addiction, with stability. He would disappear for months, then show up asking for help. Usually I said no. But 3 years ago he came to me with a different story. He said he wanted to start over, to be there for his sister, to get clean. He needed money to pay off some dangerous people and fund a small business. I gave it to him, hoping that this time would be different. And then he died," Adelaide said quietly. "And then he died." Grayson looked out the window, his profile sharp against the bright sky. "I didn't find out about the accident for weeks. Gabriel and I weren't in regular contact. By the time I tracked down his affairs, I discovered he had debts scattered everywhere and a sister living with a foster family. Maya. I've been having my lawyers monitor the situation, making sure she was taken care of, and that's when we discovered you." Adelaide felt a chill. "You've been watching me." "Not watching, just aware." "Miss Rivers, you've paid over $200,000 toward Gabriel's debts over the past 3 years. Why?" The question hung between them. Adelaide looked down at her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. "He asked me to, before he died. I was at the hospital, waiting for news about my father, and they brought Gabriel in from the same accident. He was barely conscious, but he grabbed my hand and begged me to take care of Maya, to not let his debts ruin her life. I didn't know my father was already gone. I didn't know Gabriel would die too, but I made a promise and I kept it." Grayson was silent for a long moment. When Adelaide looked up, she found him staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "That's extraordinary," he finally said, "and deeply unfair to you. Gabriel killed your father and you've spent 3 years paying his debts. The accident wasn't entirely his fault," Adelaide said, though the words tasted bitter. "The roads were icy. My father ran a red light. It was just a terrible, tragic accident. Still." Grayson leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Miss Rivers, Adelaide. May I call you Adelaide?" She nodded. "Adelaide, I don't want your money. I have more than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. The loan to Gabriel was written off in my books years ago. I only tracked you down because I wanted to understand who would do what you did, and to make sure you weren't being harassed by anyone claiming to represent me." Relief flooded through her so suddenly that tears sprang to her eyes. "You don't want me to pay it back?" "No. In fact, I'd like to repay you for what you've already paid, $200,000 plus interest plus compensation for your time and suffering." Adelaide shook her head, swiping at her eyes. "I can't take your money." "Why not? You took Gabriel's debts." "That was different." "That was a promise." Grayson smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "Then let me make a different offer. I need someone I can trust. Someone who keeps promises even when it costs them everything. Come work for me." "Doing what?" Adelaide asked, bewildered. "I don't have a business degree. I've been working as a restaurant server and a night clerk at a convenience store. I need a personal assistant, someone to manage my schedule, handle confidential matters, coordinate between my various interests. Sophia is moving to our London office next month, and I've been interviewing replacements for weeks. No one feels right, but you're exactly what I'm looking for." "You don't know anything about me," Adelaide protested. "I know you're loyal. I know you honor your commitments. I know you're willing to sacrifice for others. That's more valuable than any MBA." He named a salary that made Adelaide's vision blur. It was more than she'd made in the past 2 years combined. Plus benefits, of course. Health insurance, retirement matching, 4 weeks paid vacation. Adelaide couldn't breathe. It was too much, too sudden. Yesterday she'd been drowning, and now a billionaire was throwing her a rope made of gold. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you do this?" Grayson stood and walked to the window, his hands in his pockets. "Gabriel and I wasted so many years on resentment and distance. I never got the chance to make things right with him, but maybe I can make things right with the person who loved him enough to keep his final promise." "I didn't love him," Adelaide said. "I didn't even know him." He turned back to her, and there was something fierce in his eyes. "Then you're even more remarkable than I thought. Think about it, Adelaide. You've spent 3 years paying debts. Let me spend some time repaying mine." Adelaide thought about her cramped studio, the smell of old grease that clung to her hair from the restaurant, the exhaustion that had become her constant companion. She thought about Maya, bright and hopeful in college, unaware of how close she'd come to losing everything. She thought about her father, who had always told her to be kind, to help where she could, to be someone who made the world better. "Okay," she said. "Yes, I'll take the job." Grayson's smile was radiant. "Excellent. When can you start?" Over the next 2 weeks, Adelaide's life transformed so completely that she kept expecting to wake up from a dream. She gave notice at both her jobs, enduring her manager's surprise and envy in equal measure. Grayson arranged for her to have a new apartment, a spacious 1-bedroom in a building with actual security and windows that didn't stick. He insisted it was part of the compensation package, that he needed her to be rested and focused, but Adelaide suspected he simply couldn't stand the thought of her going back to that decrepit studio. Sophia spent hours training her, walking her through Grayson's schedule and preferences. He was meticulous about time, hated small talk at business dinners, and had a weakness for dark chocolate and terrible action movies. He ran 5 miles every morning at 6, worked until 7 most evenings, and spent his weekends either at the office or at his house outside the city. "He's a good boss," Sophia said on Adelaide's last day of training. "Fair, brilliant, demanding, but not unreasonable. Just don't expect him to open up about personal things. He keeps that locked down tight." Adelaide nodded, but she'd already sensed that about Grayson. In the meetings she'd sat in on, watching how he operated, she'd seen his charm and intelligence, the way he could read a room and adjust his approach. But there was always a wall there, a careful distance he maintained. Her first official day, Adelaide arrived at 7 in the morning to find Grayson already at his desk, reading through reports with a cup of black coffee at his elbow. "Morning," he said, glancing up. "There's a client meeting at 9, tech startup looking for acquisition funding. I need you to take notes and follow up on the action items." The meeting was intense. 3 young entrepreneurs pitching their social media analytics platform to Grayson, who listened with perfect attention before asking questions so pointed that Adelaide saw them sweat. In the end, he agreed to have his team review their proposal more thoroughly. After they left, Adelaide said, "You already decided you're not investing, didn't you?" Grayson raised an eyebrow. "What makes you say that, the way you phrased the follow-up?" "Have my team review instead of let's schedule another meeting, you're passing them off." He laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "Sophia was right about you. Yes, their platform is too niche and their burn rate is unsustainable, but they're young and trying hard. They deserve a thorough response, not a flat rejection." As the weeks passed, Adelaide fell into the rhythm of working for Grayson. It was demanding, sometimes overwhelming, but never boring. She coordinated with executives across his various holdings, managed his calendar like a military campaign, and learned to anticipate his needs before he voiced them. She also learned things about him that didn't appear in any business profile. He donated anonymously to dozens of charities. He remembered the names of every person he met, from janitors to CEOs. He worked ferociously hard because he'd built his fortune from almost nothing, his father having lost most of the family wealth before dying young. And he was lonely. Adelaide saw it in the way his face went blank when his phone didn't ring over the weekends, in how he stayed late at the office rather than going home to an empty house. 3 months into the job, Adelaide was working late herself, preparing materials for a board meeting the next day. Everyone else had gone home. She was alone in the outer office when Grayson's door opened. "You're still here," he said, loosening his tie. He looked tired, shadows under those gray-green eyes. "Just finishing up. I'll be done in 20 minutes. Take a break. Come look at this." Adelaide followed him into his office. He dimmed the lights and was standing by the windows, looking out at the city lights spread below like scattered jewels. "I never get tired of this view," he said. "Sometimes I forget to actually see it, but it's always there, waiting." Adelaide joined him at the window. From this height, the city looked magical, all the ugliness hidden by distance and darkness. "It's beautiful." "I wanted to thank you," Grayson said. "These past few months have been the smoothest my life has run in years. You're exceptional at this." "I just do what needs doing." He turned to look at her, and Adelaide felt that familiar flutter in her chest that she'd been trying to ignore. Somewhere along the way, her respect for Grayson had shifted into something more complicated. She noticed the way his shirts fit across his shoulders. She caught herself watching his hands as he wrote notes or scrolled through his phone. She looked forward to making him laugh, to seeing his rare, genuine smiles. "That's exactly why you're good at it," he said. "Adelaide, can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." "Why don't you hate Gabriel, or me by extension? He killed your father, I'm his brother, but you've never shown any resentment." Adelaide considered the question. "I was angry at first, furious. I wanted someone to blame, something to rage against. But anger is exhausting, and I was already so tired from grief. Gabriel was dying, and he used his last moments to think about protecting his sister. That's not a villain. That's just a broken person trying to do one last good thing. And you're not responsible for your brother's choices. You're just someone trying to make sense of the wreckage, same as me." Grayson was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I'm glad you're here, Adelaide. I'm glad Gabriel's last act brought you into my life." Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition of connection that went beyond employer and assistant. Adelaide felt it like a physical presence in the air. "I should finish those materials," she said, suddenly needing distance to catch her breath. "Right. Yes, don't stay too late." But they both stayed late into the night, working in their separate spaces, aware of each other in a way that was entirely new. The next few months tested Adelaide's professionalism in ways she hadn't anticipated. Grayson seemed to find more reasons to work closely with her. He asked her opinion on deals, invited her to client dinners where her job was simply to be there, to observe and offer thoughts afterward. They fell into easy conversations about everything from books to politics to the best pizza in the city. Adelaide knew she was falling for him. She tried to stop it, reminding herself of every reason why this was a terrible idea. He was her boss. He was a billionaire who moved in circles she couldn't imagine. He probably saw her as an employee, nothing more, but her heart didn't listen to logic. She noticed things about him that she shouldn't. The way he rubbed his temples when he was stressed. How his accent shifted slightly when he was tired, revealing hints of the Queen's neighborhood where he'd grown up. The fact that he wore the same watch every day, a modest Timex that had belonged to his father. 6 months into her job, Grayson invited her to accompany him to a charity gala. "It's for childhood literacy," he explained. "I'm on the board. Usually, I take Sophia to these things for moral support, but since she's in London now, I thought you might be willing to suffer through an evening of rubber chicken and people asking me for money." "Part of the job?" Adelaide asked. Something flickered across his face. "If you prefer to think of it that way." She wore a dress she'd bought with her first real paycheck, a deep blue that made her brown eyes look almost black. When she met Grayson in the lobby of the hotel hosting the gala, his expression made her feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You look stunning," he said simply. "You clean up pretty well yourself." The gala was overwhelming. Hundreds of people in expensive clothes, drinking champagne and discussing vacation homes and stock portfolios. Adelaide felt out of place until Grayson offered her his arm and leaned down to whisper, "We'll stay for 2 hours, show our faces, and then escape for real food." "Deal," she laughed. "Deal." Grayson introduced her as his assistant, but the way he kept his hand on her lower back as they moved through the crowd felt like something else. Several people assumed she was his date, and he never corrected them. When a particularly persistent socialite tried to monopolize his attention, Adelaide watched him deflect with practiced charm, always finding a way back to her side. They were standing by the bar when a man approached, handsome in a polished, artificial way. "Grayson Martinez." "Didn't expect to see you here, Connor." Grayson's voice went cool. "Adelaide, this is Connor Walsh. We went to business school together." Connor's eyes raked over Adelaide in a way that made her skin crawl. "And who's this? Your latest acquisition?" "She's the person who keeps my life running," Grayson said, his tone sharp enough to cut. "And she's far too good for either of us." Connor laughed. "Same old Grayson, always collecting strays. First your brother, now pretty assistants." "Do you have a savior complex, or do you just like feeling superior?" Grayson went very still. Adelaide felt the tension radiating off him like heat. Before she could think better of it, she said, "I'm sorry, but who are you again?" "Grayson's mentioned so many important people. I'm having trouble placing you." Connor's smile froze. "I run Walsh Enterprises." "Oh, right. The commercial real estate firm that lost the Riverside development contract last month. That must have been disappointing for you." Grayson made a sound that might have been a strangled laugh. Connor's face flushed. "Excuse me," he muttered and stalked off. "That was incredible," Grayson said, looking at Adelaide with unconcealed admiration. "How did you know about the Riverside contract?" "I read everything that crosses your desk. I figured you needed to know what your old classmate was up to." "Adelaide Rivers, you are full of surprises." They left shortly after, claiming an early morning meeting. Outside, the night air was cool and fresh after the stuffy ballroom. Grayson loosened his bow tie with a sigh of relief. "Thank you," he said, "for deflecting Connor. He's been an ass since we were 22. "What did he mean about your brother?" Grayson was quiet as they walked toward where his car was parked. "Gabriel used to show up at my office sometimes when he was high or drunk. It was embarrassing, and people like Connor made sure everyone knew about it. They saw Gabriel as proof that I wasn't really one of them, that I was just trash who got lucky." "You're not trash," Adelaide said fiercely. "You built something incredible through hard work and intelligence. Connor Walsh inherited his company from his father and is running it into the ground. You don't owe people like him anything." Grayson stopped walking and turned to face her. They were under a streetlight, and it cast shadows across his features, making him look younger and more vulnerable. "Why do you defend me?" "Because you deserve it." "Adelaide." Her name was rough in his voice. "I need to tell you something. These past months working with you, I've started to feel things I shouldn't. You're my employee and it's inappropriate, and I've been trying to ignore it, but tonight, seeing you in that dress, watching you face down Connor without flinching, I can't pretend anymore." Adelaide's heart was thundering so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. "What kind of things?" "I think about you constantly. When you smile, my whole day gets better. When you're not in the office, I find excuses to text you just to see your name on my screen. Adelaide, I'm falling for you and I don't know what to do about it." She took a step closer to him. "You could kiss me, that might be a good start." His eyes searched her face. "Are you sure? This changes everything." "I'm sure, Grayson, I've been falling for you for months. I tried to stop, but you're kind and brilliant and funny, and when you look at me, I feel like I matter. You do matter. You matter more than you could possibly know." Then he was kissing her, and Adelaide felt like the entire world had shifted into focus. His hands cupped her face with such gentleness, and his lips were warm and soft and perfect. She melted against him, her fingers curling into his jacket, holding on like he might disappear. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grayson rested his forehead against hers. "Come home with me," he said. "Not for anything except more time together. I don't want this night to end." Adelaide nodded, not trusting her voice. His house was outside the city, a modern masterpiece of glass and wood nestled into a hillside. Inside, it was surprisingly warm and lived in, with comfortable furniture and books everywhere. They kicked off their formal shoes and sat on his couch, still in their gala clothes, talking until dawn crept through the windows. Grayson told her about growing up poor, about his mother working 3 jobs to keep them afloat, about putting himself through community college and then state school, about his first business venture that failed spectacularly, about the mentor who took a chance on him and taught him how to think like an investor. Adelaide told him about her father, the single parent who raised her with love and laughter, about her dreams of being a writer that she'd put aside to be practical, about the loneliness of the past 3 years. "You could still write," Grayson said, playing with her fingers, tracing the lines of her palm. "You don't have to give up your dreams." "Maybe," Adelaide said. "Right now, though, this feels like exactly where I'm supposed to be." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, until they were tangled together on the couch, hands exploring, hearts racing. But when things started to move toward his bedroom, Grayson pulled back. "Not yet," he said, his breathing ragged. I want you so much it's painful, but I want to do this right. I want to take you on proper dates, to court you like you deserve." Adelaide felt a surge of love so strong it shocked her. "You're serious about this, about us?" "I've never been more serious about anything." He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Adelaide, I know it's fast, but I can't imagine my life without you anymore. You've become essential to me." "I feel the same way," she whispered. They spent the rest of the weekend together, barely leaving his house except to venture into the garden, where wildflowers grew in deliberate chaos. Grayson cooked, revealing yet another unexpected skill, and they watched old movies curled up together, talking during the boring parts and laughing at each other's commentary. Monday morning, they had to figure out the logistics. Adelaide offered to resign so there would be no conflict of interest, but Grayson refused. "I need you as my assistant," he said. "No one does the job like you do. We'll be professional at the office and we'll be together everywhere else. We're both adults. We can manage this." It was harder than Adelaide expected. Seeing Grayson in his office in full CEO mode made her want to kiss him. The way he looked at her sometimes, with heat and longing barely restrained, made her lose her train of thought. But they managed, maintaining careful boundaries during work hours. Outside the office, though, they were inseparable. Grayson took her to quiet restaurants where they could talk for hours, to museums where they argued cheerfully about art, to his favorite hole-in-the-wall pizza place that served the best slices in the city. He met Maya, who was home from college for break, and charmed her instantly by asking about her studies and treating her like a person, not a charity case. "He's amazing," Maya said later, pulling Adelaide aside. "Are you too serious?" "Very," Adelaide admitted. "Good." "You deserve something good, Addie. After everything you did for me, for Gabriel, you deserve someone who looks at you the way he does." 2 months into their relationship, Grayson took Adelaide back to the place where everything started, the hospital where Gabriel had died and where she'd made her promise. They stood in the parking lot, holding hands. "I've been thinking a lot about fate," Grayson said. "About how random events can change everything. Gabriel's choices brought us together, but it was your choices that made you who you are. I love you, Adelaide, not because of what you did for Gabriel or for Maya. I love you because you're kind and strong and funny and brilliant. I love you because when I'm with you, I'm the best version of myself." Adelaide felt tears streaming down her face. "I love you too. I never thought I'd feel this way again after losing my dad, like life could be full of joy and possibility. But you've given that back to me." They kissed in the shadow of the hospital, reclaiming the place of tragedy and turning it into something else. That night, Adelaide finally went home with Grayson with the clear intention of staying. He was gentle and passionate, worshipful of her body, attentive to every sound and movement. Afterward, lying tangled in his sheets, Adelaide felt complete in a way she'd never experienced. "Move in with me," Grayson said, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "I know it's fast, but I hate when you leave. I want to wake up with you every morning." "What about work?" "People will talk. Let them. I don't care what anyone thinks except you," Adelaide considered. Her apartment, nice as it was, had never felt like home. Home had become wherever Grayson was. "Okay, yes." His smile was blinding. The next few months were a blur of happiness. Adelaide moved into Grayson's house, filling it with her presence. She set up a writing space in one of the spare rooms and started working on a novel in the early mornings before they went to the office together. Grayson read every word she wrote, offering encouragement and honest feedback. At work, their relationship became an open secret. Grayson never hid how he felt about her, though he was always professional in meetings. His staff adjusted, and Adelaide proved herself over and over, her competence and work ethic making it clear she'd earned her position. Maya came to visit often, treating them like a unit. She called Grayson when she needed advice and sent Adelaide memes in the middle of the day. She was thriving in college, studying engineering, talking about internships and study abroad programs. The shadow of Gabriel's debts had lifted from her completely. One evening, almost a year after they'd met, Grayson and Adelaide visited Gabriel's grave. They'd brought flowers, bright sunflowers that seemed too cheerful for a cemetery, but Adelaide remembered Maya mentioning they were Gabriel's favorite. "I'm angry at him sometimes," Grayson admitted, staring at the headstone. "For wasting his life, for hurting people, for dying before we could fix things between us. But I'm also grateful. Without him, I would never have met Adelaide. My life would be emptier, colder." "I think he was trying," Adelaide said quietly. In his own broken way, he was trying to protect Maya, to make things right. That loan he asked you for. He probably did want to change, even if his addiction was too strong. The fact that his last thoughts were for his sister tells me that somewhere in him, there was love. You're too generous." "No, I just understand that people are complicated. Gabriel wasn't a villain or a hero. He was just human." Grayson pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "I love how you see the world. You make me want to be more forgiving, more open." That night, Grayson made dinner, a complicated pasta dish that required his full concentration. Adelaide sat at the kitchen island, drinking wine and watching him work, marveling at how domestic this felt, how right. After dinner, they went out to the garden. It was late spring, and everything was in bloom, the air heavy with the scent of roses and jasmine. String lights Grayson had installed turned the space into something magical. "Adelaide," he said, taking her hand. "A year ago, I was going through the motions of life, successful but hollow. Then you walked into my office and everything changed. You brought light and laughter and love into my world. You challenge me, support me, make me want to be better. I can't imagine a future without you in it." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small box from his pocket. Adelaide's breath caught. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to make you as happy as you've made me?" The ring was perfect, a simple diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the garden. Adelaide was crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Grayson slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms, kissing her with such joy and passion that Adelaide felt dizzy. They danced in the garden to music only they could hear, celebrating the promise of forever. The wedding took place 6 months later in that same garden, with fairy lights and flowers everywhere. Maya was Adelaide's maid of honor, standing beside her as she married the man who had become everything to her. Grayson's mother was there, a small woman with her son's sharp eyes who hugged Adelaide and whispered, "Thank you for making him happy." The ceremony was simple and heartfelt. They wrote their own vows. Grayson promised to honor her dreams, to support her writing, to be her partner in every sense of the word. Adelaide promised to stand beside him through challenges, to bring laughter into his life, to love him with everything she had. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Grayson kissed her like she was precious and vital, and Adelaide felt the weight of the past 3 years finally lift completely. She'd started this journey paying a stranger's debts, bound by a promise made in grief. She was ending it married to a man who saw her, truly saw her, and loved what he found. The reception was small, just close friends and family. They danced under the stars, ate too much cake, and laughed until their sides hurt. Maya gave a toast that had everyone crying, talking about how Adelaide had saved her when she had no one, and how Grayson had given Adelaide the life she deserved. Late in the evening, Grayson pulled Adelaide away from the party, leading her to a quiet corner of the garden. "Happy?" he asked. Deliriously. "Good, because I have a gift for you." He handed her an envelope. Inside were documents. Adelaide scanned them, confused at first, then stunned. "You paid off my student loans, every penny, and I set up a trust for your writing career. You'll have financial support for 5 years to write full-time if you want. No pressure, no expectations, just the freedom to pursue your dreams." Adelaide couldn't speak. She threw her arms around his neck, holding him tight. "I don't deserve you. You deserve everything," he said fiercely. "You gave 3 years of your life to honor a promise to a dying stranger. You sacrificed everything without complaint. Let me give back to you, Adelaide. Let me spend our life together making sure you know how valued and loved you are." They stood there in the garden, wrapped in each other's arms as their wedding party continued around them. Adelaide thought about the journey that had brought her here, the accident that killed her father and set everything in motion, the promise that had chained her for 3 years, the final debt that had led her to Grayson. All of it, the pain and the sacrifice and the struggle, had been leading to this moment. A year into their marriage, Adelaide sold her novel. It was a modest advance, nothing that would change their financial situation, but Grayson celebrated like she'd won the lottery. He threw her a party, bought dozens of copies to give to everyone he knew, and told anyone who would listen that his wife was a published author. "You earned this," he kept saying. "This is all your talent and hard work." Adelaide continued working as his assistant, finding that she loved the balance between helping run his business empire and pursuing her creative work. They were partners in every sense, supporting each other's dreams and ambitions. Maya graduated college with honors and got a job at a top engineering firm. She came to visit often, bringing stories of her life and asking their advice. She'd started dating someone, a kind young man who treated her well, and she was happy in a way that made Adelaide's heart soar. "I think about Gabriel sometimes," Maya said one evening over dinner, "about how things could have gone so differently if he'd made better choices. But I also think he'd be glad somehow that his death brought you two together. He always wanted me to have a family, people who cared. You've given me that." 2 years into their marriage, Adelaide found out she was pregnant. She told Grayson on a Sunday morning, sitting in their garden with coffee and pastries. He stared at her for a long moment, then pulled her into his lap, his face buried in her neck, his shoulders shaking. When he looked up, tears were streaming down his face. "We're having a baby. We're having a baby." He kissed her belly, then her lips, then her belly again, as if he couldn't decide which miracle to focus on. "I'm going to be a father. We're going to be a family." "We already are a family," Adelaide said, running her fingers through his hair. "But yes, we're expanding." The pregnancy was smooth, and Grayson was attentive to the point of being comical. He read every book on parenting, installed the car seat 3 months early to make sure he did it right, and talked to Adelaide's belly every night, telling their daughter all about the world she'd be entering. They had a girl, born on a bright autumn morning with her father's gray-green eyes and her mother's dark hair. They named her Grace, for the grace that had brought them together, and Marie after Grayson's mother. Holding his daughter for the first time, Grayson wept openly. "She's perfect." "You're perfect. I don't know what I did to deserve this, but I'm grateful every single day." Adelaide watched him with their daughter and felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. This was what all the struggle had been for. This moment, this family, this love. Maya came to the hospital to meet her niece, cooing over the tiny baby with such tenderness that Adelaide saw the teenage girl she'd helped raise fully grown into a remarkable woman. "Thank you," Maya said, hugging Adelaide carefully. "For everything you've done, for keeping your promise to Gabriel, for being the family I needed." This little one is going to be so loved. Grace grew into a bright, curious toddler who had her father wrapped around her tiny finger. Grayson, the hard-nosed CEO who negotiated billion-dollar deals, would spend hours having tea parties with stuffed animals and reading picture books with different voices for each character. Adelaide published her second novel, then her third. She found a readership that loved her stories of ordinary people finding extraordinary love. Every book was dedicated to Grayson, the man who had changed her life. On their 5th wedding anniversary, they returned to the hospital where Gabriel had died, where Adelaide had made her promise. They brought Grace, who was 2 now and full of questions about everything. "This is where your Uncle Gabriel passed away," Adelaide told her daughter. "He was sad and sick, but he loved his sister very much, and because I met him, I ended up meeting your daddy." "Daddy," Grace said, reaching for Grayson. He picked her up, settling her on his hip. "That's right, sweetheart. Sometimes sad things lead to beautiful things. We remember the sad, but we celebrate the beautiful." They placed flowers by the hospital's memorial garden, a small gesture of remembrance. Then they went home, to the house filled with laughter and love, to the life they'd built from tragedy and promise. That evening, after Grace was asleep, Adelaide and Grayson sat in their garden, the space where they'd gotten engaged and married and spent countless quiet evenings together. "Do you ever regret it?" Grayson asked. "Those 3 years of struggle," Adelaide considered. "I regret that I lost time with my father, that I'll never get those years back. But the struggle itself, no, it taught me what I was capable of. It showed me that I could survive anything. And it brought me to you. I'd go through it again if this was the destination." Grayson kissed her, soft and lingering. "I love you, not for what you sacrificed or what you survived. I love you for who you are. Strong, kind, brilliant, beautiful. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "Right back at you," Adelaide said, smiling against his lips. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the gathering dusk. Adelaide thought about Gabriel, about the promise that had shaped her life, about the final debt that had led her to Grayson. She hoped, wherever Gabriel was, he could see this. See that his last act, his final words, had created something beautiful. 2 years later they had a son, a boy they named Aaron after Adelaide's father. Grayson was even more emotional this time, holding his son and daughter and wife in his arms, overcome with gratitude. "My family," he kept saying. "My whole world." Adelaide looked at her life and could barely recognize the exhausted, struggling woman she'd been 7 years ago. She'd been broken by loss and weighed down by obligation. Now she was whole, filled with purpose and love and joy. She still wrote novels, still worked part-time helping Grayson with special projects, still made time for Maya, who was engaged now and planning her own wedding. On Grace's 5th birthday, they had a party in the garden. Friends and family filled the space, children running and playing, adults laughing and talking. Adelaide stood on the porch, watching it all when Grayson came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How lucky I am. How a promise made in grief turned into all of this." "You made this," Grayson said. "Your strength, your loyalty, your capacity for love. You created this life through sheer force of will and goodness." Adelaide turned in his arms, looking up at the man who had become her everything. "We created it together." "Together," he agreed and kissed her as the party swirled around them. As the sun set on their garden, painting everything in shades of gold and rose, Adelaide Rivers Martinez felt a profound sense of peace. The debts were long paid, the promises were kept, and the love, the unexpected, world-changing love that had grown from tragedy, would last forever. She'd spent 3 years paying a stranger's debts. never knowing that the billionaire who settled the last one would become not just her employer, not just her friend, but her husband, her partner, the father of her children, and the great love of her life. In the end, the debt she owed Gabriel wasn't a burden at all. It was a gift, the strange and winding path that led her home,